I'm Yvonne Brannon from Public Schools First and Great Schools in Wake, and tonight moderating with me is Lynn Edmonds, who's our outreach director for Public Schools First and Great Schools in Wake. And we are very excited to have with us tonight the chair and the vice chair of the Wake County Board of Education, Keith Sutton and Roxie Cash. And, you know, I put their photo in here, but we don't really need it because we got them live. And we're so glad that they're here. I do want to take a second to tell you a little bit about Keith and Roxie. So Keith has been on the Wake County Board of Education since 2009. He is serving as chair right now, and Keith also was chair in 2013. He's been vice chair a couple of times. He is immediate past chair of the North Carolina Caucus of Black School Board Members. He has two lovely daughters, Alexa and Michaela. He received his undergraduate degree from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and his MS.Ed from the University of Pennsylvania. So Keith, we're really happy you're here. Roxie and I have known each other for a very long time. Roxie and her family moved here from the Midwest in 1985. She is a hospital pharmacist and has practiced mainly in the area of oncology. Mrs. Cash has retired from Duke Raleigh after 29 years of really hard work, and she works part-time now at Wake Med North. She, when Roxie and I knew each other, was her first stint on the board back in 1991 for 10 years, and she was chair during her time then. She won election again in 2016 and came back to the board, and we're so glad she did. She's serving this year right now as the vice chair. Roxie has 4 children and lots of grandchildren now, and all of her adult children did attend Wake County Public Schools, so that's really given her a great advantage. So we're going to get started, and Lynn's going to get going with giving us a little bit of an overview for our audience.
Thank you. Thank you both for doing this with us tonight, and thanks to everybody that's attending. We are taping this webinar and we'll post it later. Yvonne will talk about that toward the end of our time together. We put the number of schools here, 191 public schools, and there are 24 charter schools in Wake County. This number, 150 schools have distributed 20,000 Chromebooks so far. And Keith, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the discrepancy between the 150 schools having distributed these Chromebooks versus us having 191. Do you happen, like, how come it just seems a little odd? Like, why don't all 191 schools distribute the Chromebooks? Is it not needed?
So we started with our elementary schools and middle schools first. That's where the greatest need was. As you can imagine, most of the high school students already had either laptops or iPads or some sort of device. It was our younger children, younger students and families that didn't have devices. Up until last week, we were just getting to some of the high schools, and they started receiving devices as of early or mid last week. So even though device distribution started about 2 weeks ago with 191 schools, it has taken us a minute to get to all of them and getting devices, because some of the places we went into the buildings and got devices out of those buildings that were just where they were just sitting there. So we are making our way and getting to all 191, but we started with elementaries and middles first, and then making our way up to middle schools.
Thank you so much. And then Yvonne, if you'll go back, Keith, what can you update us on about the hotspot devices that have been distributed so
far? With the hotspots, we ordered, we had about 10,500 students that needed them. We entered into a partnership with AT&T and purchased about 10,000 hotspots. They have been coming in waves. I think we got our first 1,500 or 2,000 or so about a week or so ago, and we've started distributing those. I would imagine now by today At least half of those are in or so. So again, we're distributing those in waves as well as they've come in from AT&T. So we didn't just get, again, 10,000 at one time and had them, but they've kind of come in numbers as I guess they're manufacturing.
Great. Thank you for that clarification.
No problem.
And so would you like both, this is for both of you, what can you tell us about your successes? What should we celebrate about how the online learning has launched, and what have been your challenges?
Well, I know that we've been told that, some of our schools have 100% participation, and those are not just schools that have parents that have access. These are schools that we've actually reached with our Chromebooks. And so having gone out on some of the food distribution sites, I'm finding schools that, I'm surprised has like an 80% participation in some of our schools that is making me quite happy. So we're averaging about 85% of our students are online right now. Of course, some of those might be closer to 75%, 50%, but our principals are doing an amazing job of watching what their teachers are telling them about what their kids are doing online, and they are not missing a detail about that. So I think that we're going to see 100% of these kids online, which is to me pretty amazing.
Thank you.
I'll add to that, and Roxie makes a good point. Contact has been the I'm gonna say the easier part of it, but that's the part that's been where we've been somewhat successful. Engagement is the challenge, and making sure that there's no way that we can police students in terms of whether they're getting online or not at home. We need the help of parents and communities and that sort of thing to make sure that students are actually getting online. So we've been able to make contact and make sure that they've got devices, that they have the hotspots. That's the contact part of it. The engagement is the other part that's more challenging. I think some of the other successes are the fact that we had within a week an online learning website set up. The fact that we've got 4,400 teachers were distributed devices, and as you see again, the 10,000 hotspots and how many you have over about the thousands of students that needed laptops, getting those devices out. Obviously, the challenge now comes with in terms of the engagement, how we grade students. That still we're trying to figure that out. A lot of states, and I've gotten a lot of emails where parents are comparing us to other states, and we are actually doing pretty good. Some states are looking at contact hours, for example, and I've received some emails saying, why aren't you all counting hours and making sure that students are online? And again, it's tough to do that, and I'm not sure what the penalty would be if students aren't engaged a certain number of hours. And then you have states like Florida, who is the leader, considered by many to be the leader in terms of online learning. They've had all districts engaged in online learning now for several years. And when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, they were already saying to their districts, hey, we're going to switch to online learning. So many of their districts, for example, were already one-to-one districts. Every single district was a one-to-one district. We had 2 weeks to get devices out before we could even start. So we were a little bit behind in that regard in terms of just device distribution. But now that we've got devices in the hands of teachers and students, we're able to ramp up quicker now that we've got that piece. So that's been some of both the successes and challenges at a high level.
Right. Do you feel like we can take some lessons learned from this time, and when we are able to go back into our brick and mortar buildings, what can we bring with us when that learning starts to happen? Because as I've listened in on your school board meetings and seen some of the commentary. We know that this does not and should not replace in-person, in classroom learning. We're doing this because we have to right now, but what can we bring with us when we do open schools back up?
Well, for one thing, I do want to say that I am, for one person, as a conservative, very glad that we've put a lot of money into our classrooms and not into non-relationship opportunities. So the fact that we might not have been so quick to be with devices, to me, shows that we put a lot of time into what goes into our classroom and supports their teacher while they're building relationships with kids. So we did have to make a big switch, which is probably what most public schools would have to do. The fact that we're going to come back now with almost a one-to-one device is an area that I think that we jumped out now that we've gotten from this experience. The other thing I think what we've learned, and this is just something that I've learned, that our partners in this area are very, very helpful, and we need to reach out. For one, AT&T gave us hotspots. We've had great success with people in the community getting volunteers for us, Activate Good. I'm just really impressed with the amount of, so I think that's one thing that we've learned. That's one thing I've always known, but want to continue to say. We are all about partners in this community. We just cannot do it alone as a school system.
And do you think, I'd like to inject a quick follow-up to Lynn's. Roxie and Keith, do you think that in the future that we'll be able to keep a lot of these devices and internet connections available to our students? We know that we do it for more than instruction, that kids check grades, get homework assignments, mom and dads can email teachers. I mean, what do you think we'll have an opportunity to build on this experience for the future?
I mean, as of right now, that short answer to your question, I think yes, we will. We don't see, for example, going into homes or asking students to give these devices back. Now, we haven't sort of formalized the distribution process in terms of what we do in terms of maintenance and upkeep and how you repair computers and that sort of thing. A lot of districts have programs and things where students or families, pay a nominal fee, and that takes care of, any repairs, damage, and that sort of thing. So we haven't figured that part out, but we don't see going back and asking, families to say, hey, can we get that device back now? So this does move us closer to being a one-to-one district. I think one of the things, for better or for worse, that this pandemic has done is exposed some of the inequities in our communities, some of the disparities, and that sort of thing. And so this has accelerated a process where, again, we're making sure that teachers have devices now, that we're looking at internet connectivity throughout the community. And so what I think we'll learn from that, from this is, how we might improve both time and instruction. When you look at now severe weather days, we could just say, hey, we're just going to have an online learning day and not have to worry about making up a day because of snow or a hurricane or something. When you look at the amount of time that would have taken to get professional development to our teachers, again, everybody's had to ramp up and accelerate their learning around teachers being able to use technology now in a remote sort of way. So there are a number of things I think that we are learning and will continue to learn through this process as we move forward.
Thank you.
That's good news.
Yvonne, you want to advance? So quickly, so we can get on to talking about the budget, can you please tell us what's going on with appeal hearings? Normally, those are done, obviously, in person. I'm sure you've had to move those to virtual, but how does that work? How does that process work now?
Well, that's worked, I think, fairly well. I hope parents believe that. I mean, I believe that the Student Assignment Office has kept right as fast as they can doing those appeals virtually or by phone. And I feel like from the parents I've heard from that has worked fairly well. And they've been on target. And we as a board have been having virtual meetings to hear those appeals quite regularly. And I think we are staying right on the agenda that we need to be in order that parents can hear back as quick as possible. I've been very surprised at how well, not surprised, but I've been pleased by how well that has worked. I mean, I think Keith, you can put on your, I think you feel the same.
No, yeah, with that, I mean, we've got, number one, we've got a great communications team and IT team. And so when this all happened, we really kind of just switched to, using tools like Cisco WebEx and Zoom and other platforms to just conduct meetings. And then our board has adapted very quickly. We did our first meeting a couple weeks ago. We started out in closed session using the Cisco platform, and by the time we had gone about an hour or so, all the board members were using their cameras and muting their mics and using the cameras and the raise function, that sort of thing. And so it has really been a very quick switch to, going virtual and online. And with that, we have not really missed a beat. We've not gotten behind or backlog in terms of appeal hearings for parents. We've kept up, as Roxie indicated, we've kept that pace up. We've been able to continue to scale the meetings and really move right along. Almost.
The fact that you're on schedule, do you have a perception that parents are understanding the new process and they're able to navigate that?
I've heard from, I keep in touch with the parents quite regularly about student assignment issues, and I've heard that that's worked real well. I've not heard anybody complain about it. And I do want the parents to know that when the board meets about this, we spend hours going over these. We do not rush through them virtually. I think we even take more time. We are talking about it for a very long time. So we put a lot of effort into reading every one of those transfer appeals. And so there's no shortcuts. I think parents have gotten on fine.
If I can just put it in perspective quickly, when a parent comes in for an appeal hearing, they've got 3 minutes to state their case to a staff panel. They spend longer in the car on the way to central office than they do in the appeal hearing. So I probably appreciate the fact that they can get on the phone or do a virtual or Zoom call from the comfort of their office or home or wherever they are, and do that as opposed to having to fight through traffic and everything else to get over the crossroads. So.
Right.
So, that is part of the thought too that parents have been asking is, I think there are some of these things that you might want to offer in the future. Do you want an in-person meeting or a Zoom meeting? Because I think you've hit on something there, Keith. I think a lot of people are going to say, hey, some of this is better and more productive. And I don't have a car. I can't ride the bus for 3 transfers. Or I don't have the budget right now to, rent a cab. So I think that actually, I'm very excited to hear you say that. And I would, as an advocate for our system, I would hope that maybe this would be an opportunity for families who have a hard time getting to central office and Cary in the future. So that's exciting.
Yeah,
well,
excellent point.
To another topic that we've gotten, questions from folks about is, they're thinking, okay, we're heading towards the end of the school year. What's going on with summer reading camps? Have we heard anything? What is Wake County going to do? Are you allowed to do anything above what the state says?
Go ahead.
Yeah, we're still waiting on guidance from the state around some of that. The biggest question I think around this piece is around the calendar flexibility. There's been conversation about do we come back for a summer school? Are we able to start early and start as early as August 3rd? We've heard some pushback around that because there's concern from the travel and tourism industry about starting so early in August. I think most of the waivers right now are around testing and that sort of thing. I have not seen, it's not to say it hasn't happened, but I haven't seen waivers yet with regard to Read to Achieve. I know those are some of the things that are being considered along with the class size legislation and that sort of thing. So we're still figuring out and sort of, we're planning for different scenarios. If we're able to come back during the summer, we would love an opportunity to be able to provide a few weeks during the summer for enrichment for some students and others the opportunity to earn a grade. But we can't do that without funding from our friends in the legislature as well. So, with those kinds of things, comes in need for funding as well. And so we're still waiting on that guidance.
I think we're also, we also have a concern that, the first is we've had the State Board of Instruction of Education that we've in the iStation contract, and the iStation contract was a way that we assessed our reading programs. So we have to deal with that as well. So there's a couple hurdles that I'm not sure how we're going to get over before we get our summer reading program so that we can use it correctly. We don't want to just do it, we want to do it correctly.
And one of the things that I wonder is, you mentioned partners. So with your partners, are there other opportunities that our community could provide some remediation or programs for the summer? I just wonder, does Wake County normally do efforts like that, working with other nonprofits and maybe faith organizations to look for ways to offer some extra catch-up work or getting ahead this summer? Is that something y'all are able to do, or do you have to only abide by the state legislature?
Go ahead, Roxie.
No, I know that the churches have been reaching out a lot about food, and now they're reaching out about summer reading. We're getting people that are kind of coming out for so many things now. We need to not lose track of them, because I think that, and I'm trying to keep lots of information at hand about the churches that have reached out for all the things they want to do to help, because reading would be one of those areas that they could help. But as far as like what our guidelines, Keith might know more about that.
Well, I would say, I think at the root of your question, Yvonne, is there's concern about the fact that we'll see students who will be, by the time we return at some point in August, students will have been out of school for 4 to 5 months without, any real face-to-face instruction. And I can speak for me personally, but I think for all of us, that there's extreme concern for the students at all ends of the spectrum. But particularly those that are low performing students, underperforming students who can least afford to be out 2 or 3 months, let alone 4 or 5 months. So when you think about the learning loss there for students who struggle academically, again, as well as those students who are high performing, because you don't want them to lose ground as well. And so how we maintain some semblance of instruction and contact over a 4 or 5 month period is crucial. With that being said, how do we do that and do that in a meaningful way, one that's sort of consistent across the board for the community that takes issues around equity into account? You can have community churches that are involved at some point. PTAs can be involved, but that's going to vary across Wake County. As big and broad as Wake County is, that's going to vary across the district. And so that will be the concern, I think, for the state and the district to be a part of something like that, is how you offer that in a consistent way across the district that doesn't help some students and hurt some students when your goal is to try to help all students. So that would be the challenge. But
one of the questions, Keith, is that some of the folks in the community have had is there a way to take this virtual experience that we're doing now with kids and continue it on some level during the summer that would be Wake County focused? I'm not saying having class every day or 6 hours, but so they're kind of, I guess, hoping that maybe with all the groundwork you've laid and instruction and devices and internet, would there be any way for some of those kids to keep receiving some kind of opportunity for instruction virtually through the summer? So I know you don't know that right now, but I'm throwing it out more as a comment that people are asking and making. I know you've got too many other things to worry about.
Well, there's one thing right now that would be very helpful for every school system, and us included, is a flexibility in our calendar. Because if we had flexibility with our calendar, then we could do intercession pieces that will help all children, especially those that we are now trying to catch up. So if the legislation would give us some calendar flexibility, I am almost certain that we could do all kinds of things with a one-to-one device and help kids so much more.
Well, that is really great to hear, and I hope our audience tonight is listening that that might be something want to reach out to their delegates and make comments. To keep us moving along there, I wanted to ask you a few other questions that folks have on their mind. Is, anything that y'all can tell us about, how you are thinking about closing out the school year? As you know, a lot of people are saying, you've already kind of said, but what's going on with graduation, not just seniors, but 5th grade, or kids getting awards, or kids being promoted. And so this is a very generic question here, and you've already answered some of it earlier, but anything you want to share with parents?
I think the one thing I do want parents to know, and both the superintendent and I touched on this last Friday in our briefing, we are committed to making sure that our seniors have some graduation experience. We're not sure what that might look like, and everything has been tossed around from a drive-by graduation like the one that Wake Tech did yesterday, to use stadiums and theaters in our high schools. So it could be something that's outside or inside. It obviously is going to be guided by whatever social distancing guidelines we're facing during that time. But we have not canceled any of our reservations at the centers. We have been told by NC State that they will not be hosting any large-scale gatherings. And there were 3 graduations, I believe, that were scheduled for there. So we're looking at alternatives for those, but we've not canceled any of our dates with the convention center. As a matter of fact, we are even looking at a July or August, and we found some dates in July and August just to give us a little bit further runway to see what we might be able to come up with that still will fall within the social distancing guidelines that we're seeing at that time. So, all ideas and bets are on the table right now. I think we will see something for our seniors, and I think families and parents and students can be assured of that. It may not look like the typical graduation, but we do want to make sure that our seniors have a memorable experience as they close out their high school years.
Well, I think that's going to be good news for a lot of parents, and their students are going to be happy to hear that kind of commitment. One of the questions we kind of threw in here, which is, kind of not really under school year, but kind of, you mentioned, Keith, earlier that there may be a waiver around class size. Will Wake County take advantage of that, or will you just kind of move ahead with the current plan of fully putting it in place?
Well, obviously there are, some budget implications around that, and we are going to see, as you can well imagine, given the current economic conditions that we're already experiencing and what we see in the very near future, it's going to be tight, and so we're going to take advantage of whatever sort of waivers that we can get. But with the class size piece, does come some expense around that, and so we're going to be taking a very close look at that, and I would imagine that we would put that off for as long as we can, because that will, again, help, that will impact funding.
Well, I already heard you mention other waivers, and I won't ask you to revisit this as we move along, but I do think that, Roxie, you made a very important point about a waiver for calendar. Every year Wake County joins dozens and dozens of school systems asking for calendar flexibility. And so I think that you've already talked about that. You've talked about certainly waivers for grades and waiver for testing and waivers for the class size. Now, I really think that pretty much covers the gamut, and it kind of brings us to talking a little bit just quickly, if you have anything or thoughts you want to share with, and I think we've already kind of answered it, except one thing, and that is a lot of folks are concerned about the trauma associated with what's going on with our teachers, our educators, our students and their families. And they're wondering, if you've gotten preliminary thoughts about what we're going to do around social emotional learning or, trauma-informed programs or practice or staffing. If you've got any thoughts about how y'all are going to be working on that, because we all, I think, understand that this is not going to go without consequences for a lot of our children and their families.
Well, this is our long-reaching discussion right now, don't you believe, Keith? I think we've known this was going to be an impact from kids being home and being away from their classrooms. So I believe that now that we've got a lot of the devices, the food distribution pieces are going very well, and all the things that kept a day-to-day going along, and trying to find some budget pieces like reducing the transition into the K-3 class size. I think that will save us some money. So now I think this is our biggest thing in front of us right now, is what are we going to do for those kids and their families as far as social emotional. And that's just now is the point where we are going to have to deal with that straight on. This is a face-to-face right now. And the fact that in our budget, you know, we were trying to identify putting more counselors in our schools, and it was a big part of our 5-year plan with our budget. And the fact that we don't know what the revenue for the county is going to be like, this is one piece that I am really, really tight about. I really want us to beef this part up and see what we're going to do for kids. I mean, this is going to be what hits us right now.
Yes, and you know what we're seeing from some preliminary looks across the country and other states and in our state, not just Wake County, is that we already are seeing that we expect over the next 60 to 90 days, a lot of people losing their homes. While we have eviction protection now, we don't expect it to last all the summer. And while we have people who've lost their jobs who could make the rent 1 month, they probably can't 2 or 3. And so we've already are seeing that we expect to see a lot of kids traumatized by the lack of jobs in their home, family income, homelessness. We already know will be increasing, along with food, threatening food security. So this is very comforting to know that this is something y'all are talking about a lot. And I think this is something that the community would really support you fully in. Understanding that this takes time and money, staffing.
If one thing I've learned in the food distribution plan, I mean, I've been real involved in that from many fronts, but the one thing that I have learned that I thought I always knew, but it hit me really hard, is social workers and counselors in our schools know exactly where those kids are that need help. And if I or the principal didn't know, or a teacher didn't know, a social worker could come up to us to say, I have 5 families that need help today. It just brought back to home what we know is those counselors in our school, they're the ones who know our kids best. So I appreciated learning that.
I just want to add that from the CARES stimulus money that's coming into schools, we're slated to receive anywhere from about $23 to $26 million. One of the uses for that money is to support social emotional learning for students, along with nutrition and technology and summer programs and things of that nature. Now, what we don't know is if that will be one-time money or if that would be recurring money over the next couple of years as we, climb out of economic challenges posed by COVID. So in terms of, will we be able to use that money to hire counselors and social workers? We're not exactly sure yet, because again, that might just be a one-shot deal. But if we can stretch that money out and use that over multiple years, then that will help in being able to hire counselors and social workers. But regardless, some of that money can be used to support social emotional learning and well-being for students, and that's the key part.
And I can't resist throwing out one little fact, and that is that I'm a former social worker, and I will tell you that the National Association of Social Workers, all the professionals recommend that we have a social worker for every 250 kids.
Right.
In Wake County, we do not have a social worker for every school. We have social workers in Wake County that have 2,400 kids in their caseload. They have an elementary school and a middle school. We know that in normal circumstances, that is not appropriate. And this is going to be not very abnormal circumstances. I'm very excited to hear about these plans. And I think it takes us right into Lynn's section on trying to get us to talk a little bit about the budget this year.
Thank you, Yvonne. The superintendent proposed nearly $30 million of an increase or request from the commissioners, and I just listed here the bulk of that 29.9 million. We can advance that. I don't really have a question about it. We just wanted the viewers to be able to see that. I do want to compliment you and your staff. The budget page on the school system website is very user friendly, and I want to encourage our audience to please take a look at that budget web page. You can get to it from the home page. There is a summary about the budget, or you can read the entire document. That's there too. But it really is, I think, very informative and user friendly. So with this slide, can you talk to us about the $8.5 million that will just simply pass through your fingers and go to charter schools?
Well, I can say that, you know, that's a conservative estimate, because really the original estimate would be about 11 million. And that is based, this is a figure that we're kind of conservatively coming in with, because I feel like there are some charter schools that are not going to open now because of the pandemic. So we will keep those children, but this is a per pupil expenditure that goes directly to them. And that is a pass-through. So that is not something we can take away. And if the kids go but come back, it stays with the charter school. Many of the things that we do with our budget, as far as like the transportation, that's part of our expenditure funding, but we spend it on transportation, but it goes directly to the charter school for what they want to use it for. So that part of the budget is a set amount of dollars that has to go straight to them before we start making any cuts.
So really, the school system, what you'll keep is less than the 29.9 million, or the figure that we saw before that came from the superintendent's proposal. Yvonne, you can advance that.
Well, and even if we get a budget that, if we get no increase from the state or from the local government, the county commissioners, if we get no increase, we still have to get that extra 8.5 out of our budget. So it's still then a decrease in our standard budget.
Yes. What can you tell us about, and I do have a couple of other budget questions, but real quickly, what can you tell us about the discussion around bonds? Keith or Roxie, either of you, if you could just give a quick big picture overview of the difference between a general obligation bond and the limited obligation bond, and where we're headed and what the needs are.
Sure. Right now, we have sort of fine-tuned our assessment of what our needs are, and been working with the county, communicating that to the county, and then the county determines what sort of bond requests that would be it a general obligation bond, which is one that would go to the voters and be on the ballot in the fall, or a limited obligation bond that the commissioners could pretty much decide to borrow the money, but it doesn't require voter approval. So that's sort of the long and short of it. And I'm not sure all the factors that go into their decision in terms of what drives their decision to rather put it on the referendum, or but I know that some of it's got has to do with the amount, some of it has to do with the amount of debt capacity that they have, and so my understanding is that they are at least leaning towards on the limited obligation bond. I'm not sure if they made that as a formal decision, taking a vote on that. I'm not sure, but I am told that their preference right now is, I think, to do the limited obligation bond scenario, where they could pretty much approve the funding that's needed to provide us with the capital needs that are needed at this time.
In some of that discussion, are you all, this is about the bonds and budget, do you plan to have a joint meeting virtually? And tell us also the best ways for the public to be engaged in the process, since we're all doing this remotely.
Sure. We're looking at dates for a joint meeting. Obviously, both boards will conduct a public hearing on their respective budgets. The first of ours will be next Tuesday, and then we'll have an additional one. And I think somewhere around mid-May, I want to say May 5th or 6th, we'll vote on our budget and then send that to the county commissioners. They will also have a series of work sessions as well as they consider their overall budget. But there will be at least one joint meeting of both boards where we'll talk about a little bit about what our priorities are as both boards and our desire to really work together and be good partners and stewards around this. And I think most importantly, look at where we are and the things that are impacting both budgets as it relates to COVID and some strategies around how we try to bridge the gap that we're gonna that we think we'll see. And so there will be, like I said, a virtual meeting. I would imagine it'll be something similar to this. That would be either on the Cisco WebEx platform or Zoom, as we've done with our two or three meetings that we've done in the past. You know, folks will be able to log on and at least listen into the budget. I don't know that we'll be able to take questions during that joint meeting, but at the public hearings for both participants or parents or community members will be able to sign up and either submit a written statement, an email statement, or do a video and send in the video in which that we will record and make sure that each board member has access to their comments.
So typically during public comment and public engagement, that's recorded for others to see as well. Like the public can watch public comment on the YouTube channel or on the live feed. And I've noticed that when you've gotten public comment during this time where we've done things virtually, you read the names, but you don't read the comments. Are those being posted somewhere or archived somewhere?
Yes. Yeah, there's a link on our page and it is available. Now, I'm not sure if the comments are available on our YouTube. I know our meetings are available on the YouTube channel.
Right.
And I think the comments and the emails are sent to each board member, and there is a link where they are available on our site. I can't tell you right now where to go other than just our general website, WCPSS.net. And then clicking on board meetings, and somewhere on there, I'm sorry, I don't have more information to check it directly, but there
That's
is
okay. We can follow up, like for those that might have the same question. I just, you know, we can follow up with an answer with our audience. So, but I appreciate that. And if it's possible, this is a request, if it's possible to have the public ask questions the way the media does. I don't know that that is possible, but during the public engagement with the budget, because it is so critical.
Okay, we'll take that into consideration.
I'm kind of curious about that. I put the budget back just for a second because so I could remember these numbers. But you know, tell us, the public, the people watching tonight and who are watching recordings, something, you know, why this budget's important. What's in here and what does it do? What are we looking at when we ask for $29.9 million? And part of that is the 18.4. Can you give us some of the details that would for our audience?
Well, you know, part of our $29.9 million ask is going back to the 5 objectives that we put out in front of the county commissioners that we all agreed upon, that were all important to our constituency as well as theirs, same people, but we all agreed upon the fact that we wanted more counselors. And so that's a part of this. We've had to cut it back, but we want to continue to go down the direction of meeting our more counselors, picking up the maintenance in our schools because that has been lagging considerably. So a part of this is cutting some of that back, but staying a little bit on target with that, as well as increasing the money for our non-certified personnel like we did our bus drivers. We're trying to make sure that we get our our instructional assistants and everybody up to this $15 wage and continue to make an impact on that. So those are some of the areas that are in this, but cut back considerably, because the $29.9 million part of the budget is a very trimmed back ask. That is not going to keep up with where we were thinking we were going to go last year with these 5 objectives. And again, of course, the legislative impacts are part of that. We're opening 1 new school. We got to have an administrative staff in there. There are certain things that are required to be in there that are not necessarily funded by the state or by any governmental agency. So that is a few of the things, trying to stay true to some of the things that we promised our public last year that we were going to work very hard on.
Okay, and I thought back to the question Lynn asked about the construction bonds. So are we on a path right now to have bonds put available for next year?
So go ahead.
Well,
I know that
we've not made the decision to remove that at this point. Again, as things are evolving and changing so rapidly, you know, I won't say that won't be a possibility, but for right now, that is still on the table.
Okay, because I think it was like 325 million or something like that, and that was for new schools and some renovations and so forth. And so, you know, that's a tough one, right? Because we know that we're going to continue to see growth, and we can, you know, continue to need renovations and need new schools, and then every time you delay that, it's a big delay, right? Because it's what, 3 or 4 years to build a school?
That's right.
I think in the current, they're saying that the current CIP, they're reworking some of that, but the two core teams between the Wake County Public School System and the county commissioner, the county offices are doing a good job of working really close, which is a very good relationship to have. And I can say that I think we can assure that some of our critical projects, whether it be a renovation or a new school, are still at the top of the list. We are not going to lose those critical projects.
Okay, well, that is very good. Lynn, I'll put it back to you if you have any other budget questions you want to ask. Is there anything else, Keith, that you want to add about any of these big areas like current and expected legislative requirements? I think that's really hard sometimes for our taxpayers to understand when we talk about, Lynn mentioned a really critical, you take 29 million and then you take a 9 million out for charters, so you're down to 20. And then when you look at the 20 million and 18 of it is required, that really doesn't leave you any space for innovation or advancing goals. But anything you want to talk about in terms of the legislative requirements?
Just in those, you know, that includes, again, the class size piece. If they don't put that off for another year, then that part of that cost is in there. There are also rising healthcare costs and rising retirement costs that are part of that. Those things don't stop, and so we have to continue to adjust for those for our employees. And so those are the big ticket items that are part of the legislative requirements. And then if they do raises, we have to also adjust for the local supplement for the raises as well. So those are the bigger pieces of the legislative requirements.
And we do put money into the retirement for our locally funded, so that's another part.
I just want to say one other piece about the bond.
So once you talk about minimal salary adjustments and the benefits that go with those and the retirement benefits, it eats up that money really, really fast. And I will just say that I'm really glad to hear that you're working on finalizing the steps for the $15, or what we tend to call a livable wage for all of our employees. The county did that a couple years ago, and I think it's just you know, absolutely necessary if we're going to do that for our county employees, that we do that for our state employees, our local school employees too. So we're going to open it up now and see if we have any other questions from the audience.
So
And
Yvonne, I have been monitoring the questions, and a couple of really great ones came in. One of our local PTA presidents asked what PTAs can do to help.
Well, I'm so glad they asked. But if they, I mean, one of the things I love about our PTA is that they're just like, they want to be involved so quickly. So I know with the food distribution, we've used a lot of our PTA. Keith knows he's had some of his PTA members running all over the place, ours. But if they continue to go on our website, there is a continual need for, now I'm going to say volunteers, but we're now just getting to the point where we're really coordinating those volunteers really well. But if they've said they've been on there and it didn't get called right away, this is for the long haul, so they will get called. A lot of monetary donations are needed desperately for, as you see, and there's many funding sources that we're using. I mean, we're giving out 200,000 or 300,000 meals in the school system a day, and we're giving out maybe 60,000 or more dinners every day to families. So if they go on there, they can see that. But PTAs helping themselves get kind of, I think, into our website and organized about how they want to put their efforts in is really good about them not being too fragmented. I think our website's been really good about getting that done. That's one thing.
Great. And then a parent asked about, other than the school system doing messages in Spanish, what other resources are being provided for our English as a second language learners?
For Spanish or for other people?
This said English second language. So I would say any of our students that are not non-English speakers.
Well, the only thing that and Keith can follow me on this, the only thing I do know that is, besides the fact that our principals are doing a lot of the messaging in addition to the school system messaging, I do know that on the food sites that many of the dinner food sites, we are flyering those areas in Spanish with flyers, because sometimes we've found that if kids, families might not be on the internet, they might not have a telephone that's got the right number there. There may be many reasons, but a lot of our food distribution people are going out to the mobile parks, apartment complexes, many places, and just simply flyering, and we're getting a bigger return from that. Again, we can use volunteers for that. That's the one thing I know that they're trying to do is in that area, but I don't know about any other of the languages.
I think we've tried to make sure that, any printed material, including the work packets and things that are going out are printed in different languages. Where we have the opportunity, we've had interpreters available and reaching out to families as well. Those are probably the primary two tools and strategies that we've used. And then I think the last would be, getting out and identifying those communities where they are and going to try to meet those families, students where they are, and having folks that know those folks, who's someone who they are able to relate to, using the Wake County Social Services and others working as partners to help identify. But we're certainly open to the other ideas, and if there are pockets of the community that we're missing, we ask folks to please let us know.
I do know that the student assignment people have been really good about figuring out where the pockets are, letting us know, and coordinating what food services are going there. And if there are none, we're putting a food service in there. So I have to give them a shout out with student assignment. They're working real hard on that.
so you mentioned packets. I want to back up on that for 1 second, because I think a lot of there were some questions around how are we getting materials out. Like some of the kids and some of the courses really need these materials. I think one of the questions we had was around math 1, 2, and 3, math MVP. How are we getting stuff to kids? Any comments on that you want to share?
Just in those instances where students still didn't have devices or have Wi-Fi, we were delivering are delivering packets to students to ensure that some learning was continuing to go on. Hopefully in the next week or so, everyone will have devices and connectivity, and everybody will be able to work remotely. But in those areas, again, where there was no connectivity, we were delivering packets to those. I think in terms of support, teacher support, we've tried to make sure that students and families know that there are teachers, principals, and those are available if they needed. Two teachers have been asked to set up, I want to say, quote unquote, office hours. What we sort of might remember from college when you would set up to go and meet your professor, that teachers are available to provide support if some students are struggling or have questions with regard to their work.
I do want to just add that I do feel, and I have talked to a couple parents today, I do feel like there is some areas in like math, for instance, that especially math, that we need to probably have some conversation about this week about what kind of supplemental packets can we get to them since they're not in the classroom anymore, and that's a very tough subject. So I don't think we have that for them yet. I don't think we have our middle school and high school math supplemental materials that we need to work on. So I think that's some discussion we need to have. I think it is hard. It is hard to do math at home with your high schooler and you don't have a teacher right there. So I think there's some resources that we need to talk a little bit more about, like quickly.
Okay. Lynn, you got some more?
There's a lot of people in the queue. We don't typically put people on mic to ask their questions. So if people want to fill up the chat box, and then also I know we won't get to them all because we're almost at our time here. So we want, when you talk about how to contact us, Yvonne, I want to encourage people to use those resources to send us their questions, because this webinar is just for this 1 hour. We're going to post it and share it, but we can absolutely try to get your questions answered on our social media and through emailing you back. I'll let you say more about that. But one question here, people want to know what's happening with our special education students and students that receive like speech therapy and occupational therapy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, you know, we know that students that are in our special needs population aren't, and it's difficult for them to receive the same level of services that those that are part of our general education. And so that is another big part of what the stimulus money will be able to be used for, is to provide additional support, supplemental learning and support to our special needs students. And we'll have that funding to be able to do that. We've not received that funding yet, so exactly how parents and students will be able to access that yet, we don't really know it at this point, but please do know that there is some thought behind that, as well as some funding available to help us think through that and provide support to special needs families and students.
I don't remember what meeting it was, but one of your videos, it might have been a school board meeting, or it could have been with the chat with you and Superintendent Moore that you all are doing weekly. I remember it was said that the special education department they're working very hard and staying in close contact with those families.
Yeah.
So one of the questions here, people are talking about and wondering if you could comment on a little bit about now and future, is the whole year-round program. But things have been kind of upheaval here in terms of trying to get, I think right now you're operating on a one-track kind of focus. And some of the folks are wondering, are you going to keep doing that? How do you see that working through the year and maybe into July?
Well, we talked a little bit about that, a little bit today about the fact that our calendar, again, the fact that year-round schools be ready to open in July, it might be unlikely. And we're trying to figure out a calendar for those kids that would be on a 4-track or a multi-track calendar. Now, the track 4 might be easier, and it might be a good modified calendar. So I think calendar right now, as it will probably come to there might be suggestions coming to the board on Tuesday. And Keith, I think there's some conversation going to be around that about the multi-track year-round programs, and not if they're not ready to open in July in the county, then we'll have to fix those days somewhere else. But they are looking at it. We don't have the answer yet, but it's going to come to us.
Now, I'll just add, there are a couple of things that we do know. We know that year-round calendars has been a strategy for facility utilization. And if students aren't in schools, then we don't have overcrowding. So we don't necessarily need a year-round calendar. We do know that if there's a second wave, which they're talking about is expected, students won't need a 3-week break as they have on the year-round calendar. So those are a couple of things that we do know, for example. And so what the exact fix or solution will be, we're not sure, but we are thinking for the time being, having one traditional calendar or one modified calendar, so that it brings again some consistency around learning, instruction, and taking advantage of whatever kind of flexibility we may be given. Will be much simpler than trying to implement that on a traditional calendar, on a modified calendar, on a year-round calendar, and that sort of thing. So there will be some adjustments. We're not exactly sure what yet.
But we are thinking about this. We're concerned about July coming and not having our multi-track start. So again, we have to be sure that the state's going to let us make some movement on that in a pandemic. That would be helpful.
So one of the things that I see a question here about how kids are going to get their grades. Now, I would say that we've heard a lot about seniors. So they're asking about juniors and other high school students and, basically the K through 11 crowd. I do know that there is a state board of education meeting tomorrow in which they're going to be talking about this and voting on this. So I would say to our person asking the question today, stay tuned. If you can, watch the school board meeting tomorrow. It's on our website and on our Facebook page. And I'm not quite sure if I remember what time it is, but if you will go to the events under Public Schools First Facebook page, you'll see that we've posted about when that is. And of course, we'll be reporting it out as well. But I didn't know if you wanted to add anything to that. I think we're kind of waiting to see what the State Board of Education is going to vote on.
That's right.
Yeah.
We understand there'll be some guidance coming out tomorrow, and we don't want to speculate or get out in front of the state board. So we'll see what comes out tomorrow, and we'll adjust accordingly.
And there's one person who would like to know just what kind of devices were you sending out? Were they new ones? Were they older models? Were they Chromebooks? Were they iPads? I mean, they're just kind of interested in what kind of devices we're being able to give teachers and staff and kids.
Yeah, these were Chromebooks. They were, again, some of them were the devices that were already in the buildings that were on the device carts. And then we ordered or accelerated an order of new devices, both the Chromebooks and the Wi-Fi hotspots from AT&T. But they were new.
Very good. And Lynn, I just want to make sure, did you see any other really important question that I might have overlooked? She's been watching the chat now.
Along the lines of the devices, there might be a little bit of confusion and misunderstanding. If a school had to distribute all of their devices, I believe some of those devices were given to other students at a different school. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So
they've kept track of that, and those schools will get their devices back or they'll be replaced. So they're not going to have a loss of devices in a school. The principals have been very, very vocal about that and very on top of that. So I think that'll do out fine.
Sure. So Yvonne, thank you for that. There are people, like I said, that have their hands raised, or they might expect to be put on live so that they can ask their own question. They didn't use the chat box, and I just want to reiterate, as you tell our audience how to stay in touch with us, for these folks to please still send us their questions either on social media or by email, because we want to hear them and we want to try to get these concerns addressed. So do you want to talk about how people can be in touch with us?
Well, before I do that, let's give Keith and Roxie an opportunity to do some closing comments of their own, and then we'll talk about the wrap up, which will take us just a few minutes. But Roxie, you've been at this a long time. This has got to be a new one for you. Who would have ever thought we would be in a situation like this? And Keith, you've been on the board for over 10 years, so you've also had an opportunity to go through many budget cycles. Both of you've gone through, the construction needs and this kind of stuff. And I know there's a lot of uncertainty out there with our audience and our staff, as well as our students and their parents. I just wondered if there's anything you want to kind of say or share in a kind of a closing way to talk about where we are right now and what where you're leading us towards in the next few months, or just any words of reassurance you'd like to share with our audience.
Well, I mean, first of all, I appreciate this, and I hope maybe we could do this again. I think this is a good opportunity for us to talk to our constituents. But I do feel like you're right, we have not seen anything like this before. And so there is a lot of uncharted territory. But the fact that I think the Board of Education and the county commissioners are working really hard together to make sure that we can get every question answered and everything that we can possibly do. I feel really sorry that so many kids in 5th grade and 8th grade and seniors did not have closure to their year. That's very sad to me, and I think we all feel that, so we don't take that for granted as being a hard time for them. And I hope that they go on and have a great experience in their, whether it be middle school now or high school or college. But we would like to hear their questions. I mean, we really want continued communication, because there are things we might not be thinking about, and there's going to be a lot of spots of emptiness. But I think we all want to hear what the parents want to know, or the community as a whole, and especially the students. I need to know, what are they feeling badly about right now, or what do they feel good about? We want to share that with other people.
And Keith, I'm going to give you an opportunity now.
I'll just add, and our superintendent, she and her staff have done an outstanding job, I think, and she's talked a lot about grace and patience, and that we just ask folks to continue to extend that grace and patience to each other, to us and to each other, as we continue to work through these unprecedented times. And I would like to assure our community and parents and students that, and I often listen to Governor Cuomo's press briefings each day, and today he talked about truth and facts, and how they use data to make decisions, and we want to do the same thing. We are doing the same thing here, and that's one of the reasons why we started the press briefing. So I encourage people to tune into our briefings on every Friday. We're not on daily. We don't need to be on daily like the president or the governor. So week is probably enough. We're trying to share good information and hope that parents and students can see some of the numbers and the data and the facts that are behind what drives our decisions. And the folks, I think, have a good understanding of what we're up against, the information that really what drives us to our decision making. Then we're all the better for that. People understand, why we have to make the decisions that we make, even if it's not what they want to hear or would agree with. They at least get where we're coming from. And so I just encourage folks to continue to follow us and ask questions. And we'll try to do our best to provide both the truth and the facts.
Well, thank you very much. I will say on behalf of myself and Lynn and a lot of the people who have been sending in comments, we thank you for your time. We know that you're really busy. We thank you for your honesty and the way you've answered the questions, and you're extending to people, just keep asking questions. We're doing the best we can. And I think that's really, really important, and we really appreciate. And I can say, as someone who's been around in Wake County a long time, that we have a very experienced Board of Education right now. We, the number of years when you add it all up on those board members is tremendous. So we have a very experienced staff. We have experienced Board of Education. We have great PTAs and engaged parents and businesses. So I think that of all the places I could think to be right now, Wake County is not a bad place to be with people who really want to solve the problem and who really care about kids. So I'm going to do a little wrap up here, as Lynn asked me to. We do have a YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. That way you'll be alerted anytime something new's up. But we do record our webinars and share them. So later tonight, we'll get this up on the website. It'll be a great place to go for people who missed. Share it with your friends and neighbors. And please do, as Lynn has asked you, if you did not get a question answered or you have one you thought of later, please send it to us. We will shoot you an email back and share it. And we will also try to put it on our Facebook page if it's a key issue that affects a lot of folks, and we'll try to get that on there too. So the drill. One of the things that we asked you and hope you'll do is like help us stay relevant. So like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and look for ways that you can get our newsletters. We put a lot of effort into this to keep you informed. We watch the school board meetings, we watch the State Board of Education meetings, we participate in the General Assembly so that we can give you great information and keep you informed. Wake County is the largest school district in the the state, but the good thing about it is that we have one of the most active Wake County PTA Council, the most active and committed commissioners in the state, in my view. So I think we're gonna work through this, and we thank all of you for your time tonight, all the people who logged on and listened in. And Roxie and Keith, we're going to take you up on this. We're going to bring you back again sometime soon to see how things are going with the summer plans, and see how things are going with the budget, and keep moving ahead. I did want to add one thing, because someone keeps texting it to me. They're wondering if the school bonds, if they are done, if they use the LOBs, if this was going to make a tax increase. And I would say that from all the budget meetings I've been to with this, they are using the limited obligation bonds in a fashion that it would not. That is their intention, that it would be a way to use the money they have from the limited obligation to not incur a tax increase. So as Keith said, we don't know exactly what that amount will be and what will be delayed and pushed forward. But I think we can answer that. The operating budget is to be determined, and stay tuned, and everybody. And Lynn and I will get Roxie and Keith back to talk more about this as it develops. So thank you all. Good night to our audience. Good night, Lynn, Roxie, Keith. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Having us.